Good evening, everybody. Let's hear it for the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus. Let's hear it. I am Senator Mark Leno, and I'm your MC for this evening's gathering. Thank you very much for being here for this 35th annual memorial for Harvey Milk, George Moscone. I want to thank in advance our very talented and beautiful sign interpreter, Ari. Thank you for being here, Ari. And certainly want to thank Mayor Ed Lee for assembling us all tonight so that we can take a moment and reflect on all that happened back in November 1978 and where we are today. We have a few of our elected family here I want to recognize, in addition to those who will be speaking. I want to thank our our public defender, Jeff Adachi, is here. District Attorney George Gascon. From our City College Board of Trustees, Raphael Mandelman. Walt Donner is here from Phil Ting, Assemblyman Phil Ting's office, and we want to thank Dan Bernal here from Leader Nancy Pelosi's office. And the amazing Teresa Sparks as well. Teresa, where are you? So we are here to remember and to honor two extraordinary men, Mayor George Moscone, Supervisor Harvey Milk, who together literally changed the face of San Francisco. We're here to keep the flame of their vision burning and their memories alive. Or as Ted Kennedy would say, the work goes on, the cause endures, the hope still lives, and the dream shall never die. George and Harvey were two very different people from two very different backgrounds, living two very different lives, who strangely found their fates historically intertwined. What they found they had in common was a passion for justice and a soulful commitment to fighting for those who had the least. They fought for civil rights, they fought for workers' rights, they fought for consumer rights, they fought for tenants, they fought for seniors, they fought for children, they fought for the disabled, they fought for Muni. They were indeed working class heroes. 1978 was quite a year, and I want to share with you just a short list of those efforts that began in 1978. The Council of Community Housing Organizations, otherwise lovingly known as CHOO, leaders in the affordable housing movement, formed in 1978. NARAL, Pro-Choice California, was formed in 1978. Gilbert Baker's Rainbow Flag was created in 1978. The San Francisco Bay Times newspaper, first published in 1978. John Sims's Gay Freedom Day Marching Band and Twirling Corps, founded that year. And of course, the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus, who had their first impromptu public performance here on these City Hall steps before a crowd of 40,000 mourners 35 years ago tonight. Performing, of course, Felix Mendelssohn's "Thou, Lord, hast been our refuge." But then there was also the Briggs Initiative, Proposition 6, Anita Bryan's hateful Save Our Children campaign, Prop 13, the Jonestown tragedy. It was a year, for those of us who were here, which we will never forget, and it was a year for those who have arrived since, who will come to remember. I want to share just two Harvey Milk stories that are part of my being. Of course, it has been an extraordinary, unexpected honor and privilege to serve in the state legislature, a seat that Harvey aspired to in his race for the assembly back in 1976, 26 years before the first openly gay man would serve in the state assembly. And I want to take just a moment to remember all of those from the LGBT community who have served on the San Francisco County Board of Supervisors since Harvey's assassination. Supervisor Harry Britt, Roberta Achtenberg, Carol Migden, Tom Amiano, Leslie Katz, Bevan Dufty, Scott Wiener, David Campos, all serving not only honorably but extraordinarily successful in their efforts as county supervisors. And Supervisor Susan Leal. So each year in Sacramento, we assist high school students to come by bus to Sacramento for what's known as Queer Youth Lobby Day. And it's an opportunity for them to get a civics lesson, to learn advocacy, activism, and how to lobby a legislator. So they get a little bit of training. And these are kids sometimes 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. They're high school students, always impressed that more and more kids are finding themselves and the courage to come out as gay or lesbian, bisexual at an earlier age, and now to see young people coming out as transgender people as well. Amazing to have the kind of insight and bravado to take on the world at such a young age. So it's a very important day, and I remember among all the young students I've met through Queer Youth Lobby Day, one young girl who, 17 years old, had never heard of Harvey Milk before. And the only other gay person she knew in her life was her heroin-addicted mother. And not surprisingly, she imagined that her only future was to be like her mother, drug addicted, that there were no other options for her. It was to her mother's credit that she got forced into coming to Sacramento for this life-changing day. And I spoke with her afterward, and she was reborn. She was full of energy. You could see it on her face. You could see it in her body. And I asked her what was memorable of the day, and she said she had never heard the story of Harvey Milk. She didn't know about him. She didn't know what he had done. She didn't know how he had lived, and she didn't know how he had died. And she said she now realized, because of Harvey's life, she didn't have to become like her mother. She could do everything and anything that she set her mind to do. That's giving hope. You know, it took us 2 tries to get our special day of remembrance, special day of Harvey Milk Day into California state law. We knew we wanted to do something, especially after having that experience with this young woman whose life had been changed. We knew we couldn't create a state holiday because we didn't have any money, and state workers weren't going to get a day paid taking off. But there's something in statute called Day of Special Significance. And we had a day of special significance for teachers, and we had a day of special significance for the poppy flower. It seemed we could have a day of special significance for Harvey Milk. And it is indeed the first of its kind in the country for an LGBT person. So on a party line vote, we got it to Governor Schwarzenegger's desk, our first try, and he vetoed it. In his veto message, he said he understood and respected the intent of the legislation, but that we should keep it in San Francisco, kids, where Harvey had his greatest significance. So, of course, never deterred, we came back a second year working with our sponsor, Equality California, and reintroduced it. And I remember so many reporters asking me, why do you think you're going to get a second and different response from the governor this time around than from last year? And my response was, well, since that veto message, the governor's wife nominated Harvey Milk posthumously for the California Hall of Fame. The President of the United States, Barack Obama, posthumously bestowed upon Harvey the nation's highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And then there was that full-length Hollywood feature film that won a couple Academy Awards. And if there's one thing Arnold Schwarzenegger understands, it's box office, and Harvey Milk now had box office. He signed the bill. So it is now my pleasure and honor to introduce our hardworking, committed, dedicated, and globe-trotting mayor, Mayor Edwin Lay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for bringing us all together today.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you also again to Gay Men's Chorus. Thank you very much. Wonderful music for this holiday. And thank you. Well, let me acknowledge as well the presence of all of our elected officials. It's wonderful to join them on this day of tribute. You know, I really appreciated Senator Leno's explanation of what was going on back in 1978, because you had to realize how difficult things were in this city. It wasn't an easy city. And let me add another aspect in 1978 that I had a chance to be involved in, because in addition to all those events that happened, in 1978, we had to start beginning the rent strike in a public housing situation in Chinatown. And it was the struggle of those residents, most of whom were of Chinese American descent, that also wanted equality. They simply wanted fair housing to happen in the city that they ended up in. So things were difficult. But what arose out of those years of struggle, and particularly with the leadership of Mayor Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk, was the beginning of embracing and understanding diversity in the city and what it meant. And let me put it very simple to all of you here tonight, because I think you understand this point. I don't think I would be standing in front of you all today as the mayor of San Francisco, but for the leadership and sacrifice of Mayor Moscone Supervisor Harvey Milk. That's how significant I see their contribution here. And I make that personal point because they were such leaders of diversity, and we didn't know what that meant in those years. It was hard to discuss it, given the circumstances that happened in City Hall here, the makeup of the Board of Supervisors, of all the other elected positions, the struggles in all of our communities across town, whether it was Chinatown or Bayview, Japantown, or in the Mission, or out in the Excelsior. Everybody was struggling to try to get their viewpoints and their representation had. So celebrating diversity today means something very different, because at that time it was very threatening to do so. And we must understand that history in order to appreciate how beautiful it is today to be part of a government that welcomes that diversity and expresses it every single day with all the different officials that we get to share this wonderful leadership with. At the same time, we still have to struggle. We still have to make things work and work for everybody. So we don't rest on the fact that when Gavin Newsom declared this should be a town where same-sex marriage should be permitted, and now that we have succeeded in the courts with Prop 8 and DOMA, we don't rest with simply celebrating all the marriages here. When we learn that 29% of our homeless are LGBT background, We've got to do something about that. Yeah. And so I've really appreciated when Bevan got me involved and made sure that we did an LGBTQ connect and begin that process and made it right there at the LGBT Center to demonstrate that we're going to respond to that. Just like we've done when the federal government cut AIDS funding. We were there for people. San Francisco's always been there for people. And this is what our government will continue to do. We're going to invite people to represent all the different diversity we have. And we're going to be like this fire engine. We're going to come to the rescue of those in need. This is the spirit of our city, and I want to make sure that as long as I'm got the privilege of being mayor here, we will continue this tribute, understanding the history of where we came from, working together, collaborating, finding solutions to people's problems, and especially during the holidays, making sure we talk to other people who've got it a little better than us. Come in and help our city succeed for everybody. Yes. Yes, support the season of giving. Support the nonprofit organizations in all of our communities. Help them help everybody succeed. This is a wonderful, wonderful city. That kid proved that. And we have continuous opportunity that those who are succeeding will bring them in to help us bring everybody else in to the rest of the city. Thank you very much for this tribute. Thank you for being here. And speaking about diversity, there's a young man who taught me a lot of things over the years. He is now, of course, the Democratic leader for the state of California. He's always young to me because he's kept us always moving and working hard and paying attention to the things that we need to. And that is, of course, former state senator, former Congressman John Burton.
Thank you, Ed. You know, if Willie Brown was mayor, he wouldn't have let those fire engines go by during his speech, to tell you that stuff, or he would have fired the chief. But anyway, one of the what the mayor didn't mention is that the fight of the rent strike for the Pinyon tenants against the housing authority, he was the lawyer that led the fight. But well, this is a tough day to me. Speaking of diversity, I guess what the straight white male. But anyway, Harvey I knew. George I loved. George and I grew up together. Wasn't for George, I would not have passed the bar. He took me in 4 days and taught me more about answering, legal questions than I learned in 3 years of law school. But what George brought to the city, and it's kind of what Harvey brought, not to the city and the state, but actually to the country, is George brought the neighborhoods in the city hall. Up until the time he was mayor, the downtown groups, and I don't necessarily say that in a pejorative way, but I don't unnecessarily say it in a pejorative way either. But they actually didn't control City Hall, but if you looked at every commission, they almost all looked like me. They were all people from the more affluent parts of town. That's with an A, not an E. But George was elected by people in the neighborhood. He made those commissions look like the city of San Francisco. And George was the guy, and was really weird, and you have to be probably my age or somewhere around it. But his election for mayor in '75 was literally seen by some as a fight for the soul of the city. Those who opposed George and what he stood for and what Harvey stood for and what Eddie stood for, what my family stood for, was change and inclusion and taking care of those who needed the help of government. And those who were opposed to George wanted the city to stay the same. They were upset by gay rights. They were upset by civil rights marches. They were upset by almost anything and everything that would change the status quo. And if you were brought up in a city like we were, the status quo was pretty good. But it wasn't good for everybody, and George understood that. We understood that, Harvey understood that, and we thought it was time for the city to change and change for the better. And that's where, which is a very novel thought. But one of the things that I want to mention, in Harvey, I had the misfortune of every time Harvey ran for office, he ran against a friend of mine. And surprisingly, I supported my friends. And Harvey didn't, you know, he never held it against me because he understood it. And when the Alice B. Toklas Club, I believe they actually probably endorsed art against Harvey, as I recall. And so Harvey started his own Democratic Club, which is now the Harvey Milk Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, Transgender Questioning Club. He started the City Club, and I had to go speak before them when I was running for the House of Representatives, and it was at the Whitcomb Hotel upstairs. I remember exactly what he was wearing. He was wearing jeans. He had this big belt buckle. He had a blue, don't ask me what I had for breakfast. He had a blue t-shirt and a leather vest. And when I went up, I was going to wait for him to take a soft shot at me. And as he introduced me, he did it with grace and did it with a lot of respect. And that said a lot to me about Harvey, because I think I was 0-3 against him. But, you know, everybody talks about Harvey, and somebody said, Mark, that some young woman didn't know who he was. Again, Harvey is an icon. He reached iconic levels. You'd be surprised how many people have no concept who Moscone was. And even those of us, they think Moscone is a convention center. And those of us who grew up in the city, we still call Moscone Playground Funston Playground. So it tells you something. But one thing that I want to say, we talked about the Briggs Initiative, talked about Prop 8, but there is another thing coming down the pike. They found out, whoever they are, that they started out, you know, fighting against fair housing. They start out against gay marriage, against gays teaching, and they found out they can't do much about that, so now they're going after what they consider an easy target, transgender youth. And this is going to be the test for all of us to see that once and for all, we kick their ass, those who are so intolerant. Because I believe, you know, and clearly I do not know, but I can imagine how tough it is to be a young person and to be questioning where you are, what your sexuality is. And given as tough as it is, you know, when Tommy Amiano passed the bill, the first thing they said they were going to do is referendum it. So it's just going to be another call to battle for us, and it's going to be one that we are going to win, because picking on people who they don't think can fight back, and young people have a tough time fighting back. And young people who are going through a questioning phase in their life have a tough time fighting back. But we can fight back for them, and that's what we're going to do. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce a good friend of mine who is a colleague of Harvey's on the Board of Supervisors, Carol Ruth Silver.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you for the remarks, and thank you for giving us a context for the evening that we are here, I won't say celebrating, but that we are here observing. It was 35 years ago that I stood, many of you stood, many of you were not born yet, I guess, but those of us who are old enough to remember, those of us who were here then, stood on these very steps. And we mourned, and we tried to make some kind of sense out of what had happened. We thought about it, we talked about it. This was without doubt, the most unbelievable set of circumstances in San Francisco's political history, or at least recent history. If you go back far enough in the history, you find there were murders and assassinations and duels and so forth. But we thought that civilization had come to cities like San Francisco, and that you didn't have people who were elected officials pulling out a gun and taking out the mayor and another city official. I mean, just how strange was that? But you have to also feel the strangeness of that in the year, as Senator Leno mentioned, in which we had had the strangeness of Jim Jones, which I hope some of you remember, a local minister who took 1,000 people into the jungles in South America and then fed them Kool-Aid to have a mass suicide. That was pretty strange also. Harvey's legacy, though, is that he was able to assimilate all of the strange things in San Francisco. And his candidacy was considered very, very strange. You cannot believe that there had been no gay person elected to anything in America, anything, before Harvey was elected to the Board of Supervisors. Now, Jose Sarria had run as a gay man and had broken that code so that Harvey was not saying, I'm the first to have had the opportunity to run for office, but he was the first to win. And when Harvey won, it was not because all the gay people in the Castro rose up and voted for Harvey. It was because the little old ladies voted for Harvey. It's because the janitors voted for Harvey. It's because the shopkeepers voted for Harvey, and they voted for Harvey because Harvey was there in their shops, at their doors, at every little meeting, everywhere in San Francisco in his district, and that's why Harvey won that election. And it is a very, very wonderful thing that we are remembering him 35 years on. Very wonderful that we're remembering George Moscone, because if we do not remember, if we forget the sacrifices that have been made for our freedom, then we risk the backpedaling that will cause us to lose it. We always know freedom is not free. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol Ruth, for your remembrances and recognizing how close you were to Harvey, both as a friend and as an activist and a public official. Your presence here means a lot. I want to also thank and recognize Supervisor John Avalos for being with us tonight, and President of the Board of Supervisors, David Chu. And now we are fortunate to once again present the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus.
We all need hope just to go on living. We all need hope or we won't survive. Just like the air we need for breathing. Gotta have hope just to stay alive. Just to stay alive. Just to stay alive. You gotta give them hope. You gotta give them hope. You gotta give them hope that they can see. You gotta give them hope. You gotta give them hope. You gotta give them hope that they can hear. You gotta give them hope that they can feel. You gotta give them hope that they can believe in. You gotta give them hope that they can touch. You gotta give them hope and give them love. Give them hope, give them hope, give them hope. You gotta give them hope, you gotta give them hope. You gotta give them hope that they can see. You gotta give them hope, you gotta give them hope. You gotta give them hope that they can hear. You gotta give them hope that they can feel. You gotta give them hope that they can believe in. You gotta give them hope that they can touch. You gotta give them hope and give them love. Give them hope, give them hope, give them hope.